So, just by show of hands, how many people in here really love to shop? Okay? About 20 of us, or of you, more specifically. Of those of you that love to shop, how many of you like to shop for clothes? Okay. Pretty close. We have a few people who are saying anything. I like to shop. Let me tell you, if there's one thing that I never had to do again in my entire life, and be completely happy about it, it would be shopping for clothes. So I didn't realize that this was a thing in my life until, a couple months ago. We were in Cincinnati. And we, on our last day in Cincinnati, before we went to pick up Gideon, because Lauren's parents, Gideon's grandparents, had taken him for a couple nights, we decided to stop at the outlets. Now, not just any outlets. These are the premium outlets. The Cincinnati premium outlets. You know the ones I'm talking about? So we stopped at the outlets, and we went shopping. And after a while, Lauren was shopping, and she was going through different clothes and various things. And I said, Lauren, I'm going to go to the Columbia store. It's my favorite store in the outlets. It has polos that I really like, the ones that are supposed to keep you cool. I think it's a marketing scam, but they've got me, and I've convinced myself that I'm cooler when I wear them. And so I go and I start looking at these polos, and I'm not finding any that I want or that are my size that I'm willing to pay the price for. And so I'm heading out the door, and then I think, what would my dad do? He'd go look at the clearance rack. And so, of course, I went to look at the clearance rack, and there in front of me are 20 of these nice polos. The same size, pure white, perfect. I grabbed 3 of them. And I've got them in my hand, and this is the internal dialogue that I have. I say, Dan, do I really want to spend $8 on each of these polos? And then I would say, no, I could spend that $24 somewhere else. So I put them back. And then I start heading out the door, and then I go, but I came here for a purpose. I came here to buy these polos. I should go back and look at them. And so I go back, and I pick up 2 this time. And I say, do I really want to spend $16 on shirts? No, of course not. So I put them back. And I do this 3 or 4 times, and finally after about 25 minutes, I get so frustrated and annoyed with myself, I just leave the store as quickly as I can. And I go and I sit down on a bench right outside the store. And Lauren eventually comes up and finds me, and I said, Lauren, for some reason, I have such anxiety when it comes to clothes shopping. You need to go and you buy clothes for me. Which is kind of our general practice anyways. When I need something new, she buys it for me and tells me, what she spent. Seems to work out great. What I've come to realize, though, is I don't mind clothes buying. I mind clothes shopping. Does that make sense to you? Let me put it to you this way. When I want something, or when I more specifically need something, it's something with a purpose. And so it's something that's easy to find or easy to figure out, and often there's data or there's someone giving me advice on what and how to buy. For instance, again, you're gonna hear about 4 hunting examples, so just bear with me. For instance, in South Dakota, one of the ways that you hunt for ducks and geese is you go and you stand in a slough in the fall. Anyone know what a slough is? We don't have a ton of them around here. So a slough it's a word for a wetland or a bog. There's cattails all around. Doesn't normally get much deeper than 6 feet deep. And so you go and you stand in one of these, about 3.5 feet, 4 feet in water, in the edges of cattails, and then you call in ducks and geese, and then you have food for a while. Now to do this safely, because remember this is the fall in South Dakota, you need to protect yourself. And so you buy waders, big heavy hip waders, that are solid rubber from your chest down to all the way covering your feet. It's it's easy for me to buy chest waders because I can look at two different chest waders and say, oh, this one has 400 grams of insulation, this one has 1,600 grams of insulation. I'm going to be much warmer in 38-degree water with 1,600 grams of insulation than I am with 400 grams of insulation. And so I buy the 1,600 gram insulation. We have other things like this in our life, don't we? Clothes that we buy for a purpose. I brought a few with me today. Here's a jacket. That's great. That's wonderful. Anyone want to take a guess or an idea of what the purpose of this jacket is? To keep warm. But more than that, to keep warm when I'm going to a rather formal function in winter or cold fall. You know, this is not my normal regular winter jacket. This is a kind of a formal winter jacket.
That's not your duck hunting jacket?
This is not my duck hunting jacket. This was a gift from Lauren. All right. Hunting illustration number 2. This is a rather lightweight piece of camel clothing. Anyone want to take a guess as to what the purpose of this is? Or when I would wear this? Duck hunting, deer hunting, on a warm hunt, right? When it's in the 50s or the 60s and it's pretty warm out. This is a very specialized piece of hunting equipment. And anyone know what this is? This is a tree stand harness. Knowing the name of it, anyone want to take a guess as to what the purpose of this is and when I wear it? When I'm in a tree stand and this hooks into this sits up behind my neck and it hooks into a latch, and if I were to fall asleep in the tree stand, which has happened, and fall out, which hasn't happened, I wouldn't fall all the way to the ground and injure myself. Bill, this one's for you. Anyone want to take a guess as to what this is? Bill?
Duck hunting jacket?
This is my warm jacket for duck hunting or for those cold mornings sitting in the deer stand. That it's insulated as well, bought with a purpose. Always bought with a purpose. One last piece of clothing that's significant, especially today. Anyone want to take a guess as the purpose of this article of clothing? Fire. This is game day wear. You know what I mean? This is game day wear, especially when playing Michigan. It was a good game. All these clothes were bought with a purpose, with an intention behind them. And the reality is that most of what we wear, we buy with a purpose, with intention behind them. Specifically, if we have a job that requires a certain level of dress. You know, nurses, doctors have uniforms to wear. Road crews have safety equipment to wear. If you're a teacher, there's a standard by which you dress. You don't always show up in your blue jeans and your and whatever. Not often. Referees in basketball, there's a uniform. If you're playing on a football team, there's a uniform. We have these things for a purpose. Paul tells us something specific in his letter to the Colossians. Today he has a word for us about our uniform as Christians. These things that we are supposed to wear. Let's listen to it. Neil read it well and wonderfully for us. Our passage starts today with these 7 instructions. And I love the translation Neil used because the word spoken to us was, clothe yourself with these things. Clothe yourself with compassion, with kindness, with humility, with meekness, with patience, with perseverance for each other, and with forgiveness. Clothe yourself, prepare yourself to be dressed and to have an appearance with these things. And then Paul goes on to say something dramatically important. The next words that he says, and above all else, put on love. He says, have all these things: compassion, kindness, meekness, patience, forbearance, humility, forgiveness. But above everything else, put on love. I wonder why. I wonder why Paul says, put on love. If you were to read the book of Colossians as a whole, which is not very large, it's 4 chapters long. If you were to read the book of Colossians, you would find this theme running throughout of being in unity with each other. And not just being in unity with each other at the church in Colossians, in Colossae, but being in unity with the larger Christian community. Being together in doctrine, being together in understanding. But to do this, above all else, above everything else that you might have, put on love. It's curious, if you go back to the beginning of chapter 3, Paul says some pretty significant things about what we're to not wear. And he says these things because I think Paul understands human condition. And I say human condition not to speak about where we are in 2018, but just where we are as a fallen people. As people who are affected by sin, as people who are drawn down by the weight of sin in the world and the weight of sin in our lives. I mean, think about your daily life. Isn't it much easier to be critical, or to complain, or to get angry than it is to live in patience, or to live in peace, or to just let things that offend you or upset you or frustrate you just kind of roll off your back? Maybe y'all are better people than me, and I hope that that's the case. But for me, it's so much simpler. It takes less energy on my part to get mad than it does to stay calm. It takes less energy on my part to be upset with what I see in the news or with what I see on Facebook than to just say, I'm not going to let it affect me. It's much easier for me to get upset with poor calls during a football game than it is to say, it's just a game. Paul has these words for us because he understands that it's difficult for us. He says this in the beginning of chapter 3. He says, put to death these things: immorality, impurity, passion. Now, this word passion doesn't necessarily mean the things you get excited about. This word passion has the idea of lust behind it. Put to death lust. Put to death evil desire, covetousness, anger, wrath, malice, slander, foul talk. Notice that this is not Paul's encouragement to simply stop wearing these things until it's convenient to put them back on. He's not saying put off your anger and your malice and your slander and your covetousness and your immorality until it's just easy to tear someone down on Facebook. He's not saying put off these things and stop wearing them until you're driving through Columbus and someone's just a dum-dum on the road. You hear what I'm saying? Paul says, put these things to death in you. These aren't an option. It's not an article of clothing that you put in the back of your closet and say, maybe someday I'll need that. And frankly, this isn't the article of clothing that you take and you put in a bag and then you donate to Goodwill. This is the article of clothing that, like Jeff would do to my Ohio State shirt, you take out to your fire pit, you soak it in gasoline, And then you put a blowtorch to it. You put this thing to death. And now, after you have put to death all of these things, Paul begins to speak about unity. He says, as Neil started reading for us, in Christ there is no Jew or Greek, there is no slave or free, there is no circumcised and uncircumcised. There is one, because all are in Christ, and Christ is in all. And then he says, now put on, clothe yourself with these things. And again, he lists them all. But after it all, he says, above all else, put on love. Church, at the beginning of this calendar year, we went through 3 simple rules. Anyone remember what those rules were? Can you give me any of them?
Do no harm.
Do no harm was one of them. Do good. And then stay in love with God, or attend to the ordinances of God. Do this type of stuff. Jesus highlights the idea of simple rules for us, much like Wesley does, but he does it the way that God can, by saying that the entire law is summed up with 2 ideas. You love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and then you love your neighbor as yourself. Above all else, put on love. Church, we're a people, we're a community, we're a called group that we're told and we understand somewhere in our mind or our belief that love is what will draw people to us. I think Paul saw it in the church in Colossae, and honestly, we probably see in the church in America, or just the church today, a group that is not necessarily unified. A group that likes to tear down, a group that likes to live into those things that we should put to death. And Paul says, just stop. Clothe yourself with the things that are good, that are above this. And then he says, above all else, put on love. John Wesley had another 3 simple rules that you may have heard somewhere else. He's talking about this idea of unity, this idea of seeking to be together as the church Catholic, and Catholic little c, not Catholic big C. So the church universal, the body of believers around the world. John Wesley said, in all things, we should have unity. In non-essentials, there should be unity. Or in essentials, we should have unity. In non-essentials, we should have liberty. And in all things, we should have charity. We should give each other the benefit of the doubt, which, if we think about it, is just another way of saying, put on love. For instance, when you're sitting across the table from your husband, your wife, or your children, it's easy to start with the assumption that you just weren't thinking. You know, let me back up. Sitting across the table from your husband, wife, child, when you have this idea that they did something wrong, it's easy to start with the assumption that, well, you just weren't thinking. That was really dumb. It's easy to start with the idea from a negative standpoint of, why would you make that mistake? Whereas if you start from the aspect of love, the standard of love, you start from the standard of attempting to look at life from their situation and say, what caused you to get into this position? What led you here? And starting there will lead us into this unity that Paul calls for. Church, today, I don't know what we need specifically. I don't know what you as individuals need to put off. And remember, this language of put off that Paul uses is not take off your coat and put it on a chair until you need it again. This is a put to death. I don't know what you need to put to death in your life and put on in its place. But this is the idea that Paul has. Put to death this, put on this. Put to death this, put on this. Put to death this. Put on love. Church, we're about to celebrate communion here in a few moments. As you come, ask God what you need to clothe yourself with. Ask God to show you what you should put to death and what you should replace it with. And then ask God for the strength and the ability and the material to clothe yourself with those things. Will you pray with me? Almighty, eternal God, come now and receive us as we come to your table. Come now and do a good work in us today. We ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.